He had everything money could buy. The private jets with leather seats that smelled of newness, the designer suits that cost more than most people's yearly salaries, and the last name that opened doors before he even thought of knocking. His father's empire was his shield, his inheritance, his weapon. On paper, Lucas Reed was untouchable, but inside, he was collapsing. Every failed exam whispered shame he didn't know how to face. Every lecture slid past him like static. Everyone, teachers, classmates, even his own father, had written him off as nothing more than a spoiled heir destined to rot in luxury. Until one day, in the quietest corner of his elite school, the boy who thought he needed nothing overheard words that would strip his arrogance bare. Words not from a billionaire, not from a polished teacher, but from a janitor, a woman invisible to everyone else. Lucas Reed's life was curated like a glossy magazine spread. At 17, he attended one of Atlanta's most elite private academies, not through merit, but through legacy. No entrance exams, no nervous interviews, just a phone call, a wire transfer, and the magic of the Reed name. The school itself was a temple to privilege. Marble hallways that echoed with the footfalls of future senators, CEOs, and heirs, walls adorned with oil paintings of powerful alumni, lockers that gleamed like polished chrome. For Lucas, it was all background noise. He walked those halls like a runway, expensive sneakers squeaking against imported stone, smirking at whispers that followed him. Lucas was infamous for three things: arrogance, style, and academic failure. Teachers passed him not because of effort, but because of fear. Fear that a failing grade would mean losing a Reed donation. Students tolerated him because open defiance meant social suicide. Even his reckless insults were swallowed in silence. When the school counselor called him in about his grades, Lucas leaned back in the leather chair, arms folded, and with a smirk said, "I could buy this school if I wanted to. What grade is going to change that?" The line spread through the campus like wildfire, both admired and despised. Lucas wore the reputation like armor. To him, GPA was a joke. What could letters on paper do that his surname couldn't? But inside the Reed mansion, the show didn't work. Charles Reed, his father, was not a man easily amused. He had risen from poverty to build one of the most formidable tech empires in the country. Every gesture, every glance carried the weight of self-made discipline. His voice was clipped, his suits sharp, his patience razor-thin. "You're an embarrassment," Charles said one evening after another call from school. His words were delivered coldly, without a trace of warmth. "If you worked for me, you'd be fired already." Lucas scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "But I'm not your employee. I'm your son." "The world doesn't care," Charles snapped, eyes like steel. "Either you become someone, or you'll just be another rich kid with a last name and no spine, and I won't carry you." The silence after that cut deeper than any shout could have. Lucas understood. His father wasn't bluffing. The next morning, he still strutted into school in his birthday gift Audi, tossing the keys in his palm like a prince flaunting his crown. Some students stared with envy, others with disgust. He didn't notice. Or maybe he refused to. But someone else noticed. Someone no one else paid attention to. Near the side entrance, an older black woman in a faded janitor's uniform pushed her mop across the polished floor. Her movements were slow but deliberate, her posture upright. Her face was lined, but her eyes carried a quiet alertness. Lucas didn't look at her. To him, she was invisible, just the janitor. Background noise. Weeks passed, and Lucas's world began to wobble. His father followed through on his threat. The credit cards were cut. The Audi keys were confiscated. For the first time in his life, Lucas had to climb aboard the school bus, wedged between kids in rumpled uniforms who looked at him with thinly veiled amusement. That morning, as he dragged himself through the entrance with his hands shoved deep in his pockets, He passed the janitor again. She was humming softly while scrubbing the base of the stairwell. Her lips moved as though reciting something. "The only true wisdom," she murmured almost to herself, "is in knowing you know nothing." Lucas froze mid-step. "What did you just say?" She looked up, eyes calm, unafraid. "Nothing you're ready to understand, boy." He let out a half laugh, half scoff, but the words lingered like an itch he couldn't scratch. As she turned back to her mop, Lucas continued walking, yet his chest tightened. He had heard the name Socrates once, maybe in a class he'd ignored, but hearing it from her, someone he'd written off as invisible, unsettled him in a way no teacher's lecture ever had. That week, the blow landed harder. Test after test returned with brutal results. Math, 24%, history, 31%, biology, a merciless 0. The comments scribbled in red ink didn't even try to soften the truth. "Did you even read the passage?" one teacher had scrawled. Lucas laughed nervously at first, waiting for others to laugh with him. No one did. His mockery suddenly echoed in silence. The counselor called him in again, her patience fraying. "Lucas, you're at the bottom of your class. This isn't just about behavior anymore. This is failure." "It's temporary," Lucas muttered, shrugging. "I'll hire a tutor." "You've already had 3, she replied flatly. "They all quit." For once, Lucas had no comeback. He left the office quickly, ducking out through the back exit to avoid the stairs. And there she was again, the janitor. She was kneeling by the cafeteria, wiping up a spilled soda, her hands moving in slow circles. She looked up as he stopped in front of her. "You said something last time," he blurted. "About Socrates." Her eyes flicked up to him, sharp and knowing. "And you remember it?" "Yeah. I mean, it stuck with me." "Kind of weird, though. A janitor quoting philosophers." She set the rag down, folded her arms, and leveled him with a look that pierced deeper than any teacher's lecture. "What's weirder," she said, "is a boy with the whole world at his feet who can pass a reading test." The words landed like a punch. Lucas bit his cheek, stunned into silence. "You used to be a teacher, didn't you?" he asked quietly. Her lips curved, not into a smile, but something heavier. "Not just philosophy. I taught plenty, before life threw me off balance." "Teach me then," he said, the words surprising even himself. "Please." She studied him carefully, as though weighing the truth of his desperation. "One condition. You leave your name and your pride at the door. You start from 0, from the floor." Lucas swallowed hard. "Fine," he whispered. I can't keep failing." The janitor stood slowly, her presence taller than he remembered. She extended her hand. "My name's Evelyn Wallace," she said. Lucas hesitated, then shook her hand. For the first time in his life, he felt small, but also, strangely, seen. The first lesson Evelyn gave Lucas wasn't out of a book. It was out of a broom closet. "Sit," she told him the next morning, pointing to a bucket turned upside down. Lucas, dressed in a pressed blazer worth more than her monthly salary, looked around the cramped space. Mops leaning in corners, the faint smell of bleach heavy in the air. "You can't be serious," he muttered. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "If you can't sit on that bucket, you'll never sit in the real seat life wants for you." Something in her tone cut through his arrogance. Lucas sat. Evelyn leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "First rule, your name buys you nothing here. You're not Reed, you're just Lucas. If you want me to teach you, you drop the act. No money, no excuses. Just the truth." Lucas shifted uncomfortably. "Fine. Where do we start?" "With silence." He frowned. "Silence?" She nodded. "You've filled your life with noise. Cars, clothes, empty talk. All of it's distraction. To learn, you need quiet. You need to hear what you've been running from. For 10 minutes, she made him sit in the cramped closet with nothing but the sound of dripping pipes. At first, Lucas rolled his eyes, but then his leg began bouncing, his chest tightening. By the time she let him out, he felt raw, like his skin had been peeled back. That, Evelyn said, is what you've been avoiding, yourself. Over the next weeks, the broom closet became their secret classroom. Evelyn gave him reading lists. Not flashy business books, but Plato's dialogues, letters from a Birmingham jail, and slim volumes of poetry. At first, Lucas scoffed. "What's the point? None of this is going to help me in math." Evelyn tapped the book with her finger. Knowledge isn't about passing tests. It's about becoming someone who can stand without his father holding him up. She taught him by weaving philosophy into daily chores. As he swept floors alongside her, she spoke of Socrates' trial. While scrubbing windows, she told him of Frederick Douglass teaching himself to read against all odds. "You see, Lucas," she said one afternoon, "knowledge doesn't care about money. It doesn't bow to last names. It lives in whoever is willing to sweat for it." For the first time in his life, Lucas listened, really listened. But listening didn't erase the struggle. In class, his old habits clung like chains. His grades remained abysmal. One morning, when the math teacher handed back another failing test, laughter bubbled from the back of the room. Lucas felt the burn of humiliation, gripping the paper so tightly it crumpled. That afternoon, he stormed into the broom closet. "I'm done. I'll never get this." Evelyn didn't flinch. She pushed a mop toward him. "Clean!" He stared at her. "What?" "Clean? You say you can't? Prove you can." He slammed the mop down, pushing it angrily across the floor. "This is stupid." "No," she said firmly. "This is discipline. You think failing a test is the end of the world? Then you've never known real failure. Real failure is giving up before you've even begun." Her words sliced through his anger. He slowed, the mop gliding more steadily. And with each stroke, he realized she wasn't teaching him to clean. She was teaching him to endure. The change didn't go unnoticed. One morning at breakfast, Charles Reed lowered his newspaper and studied his son. Lucas sat straighter, his phone untouched beside him. Instead of his usual sarcasm, he quietly buttered his toast, lost in thought. "You're different," Charles said cautiously. Lucas shrugged. "Just trying to do better." His father narrowed his eyes. "Don't play games with me. Where's this coming from?" Lucas hesitated. If he revealed Evelyn, his father might crush the fragile bond. So he lied with a half-smile. "Maybe I'm finally listening." Charles didn't buy it. But he didn't push either. That night, however, Lucas overheard his father on the phone. "If he doesn't turn it around, I'm pulling him out. Boarding school in Europe, somewhere strict. No distractions." Lucas's stomach sank. His father wasn't bluffing. He never bluffed. "The next day in the broom closet," Lucas confessed. "He's going to send me away," he whispered. "I'll lose everything here, even you." Evelyn studied him carefully, her gaze steady. "Then you'll fight harder. Not for me, not for your father, for yourself." Lucas swallowed. "But what if I fail again?" Evelyn leaned forward, her voice soft but fierce. "You will fail, again and again. That's the point. Each time you rise stronger. That's how character is forged, in fire, not comfort." Her words lit something in him. A small flame, fragile, but real. The transformation deepened. Lucas started spending less time flaunting wealth and more time in the library. Teachers noticed him staying after class, asking questions. Students whispered. Some mocked, others watched with curiosity. One evening, while reviewing a history paper Evelyn had helped him draft, she circled a paragraph with her pen. "Here, this is your voice, not your father's shadow. Hold on to it." Lucas read the paragraph again, his chest tightening with pride. For once, the words didn't feel empty. They felt like him. But the closer he grew to Evelyn, the more dangerous the secret became. One Friday afternoon, as Lucas left the broom closet, he nearly collided with a group of boys. They laughed, pointing at the mop bucket in his hand. "Look at Reed," one sneered. "Daddy's cut him off so bad, he's working as the janitor now." Heat rushed to Lucas's face. Old instincts screamed at him to lash out. But instead, he tightened his grip on the bucket and walked away without a word. Behind him, their laughter echoed. Yet for the first time, it didn't destroy him. It hardened him. That night, he texted Evelyn. "They mocked me today, called me a janitor." Her reply came instantly. "Good. It means you're learning humility. Wear it like armor." Weeks blurred into months. Lucas stumbled, failed, and stumbled again. But he kept returning to that closet, to Evelyn's lessons. Slowly, his grades climbed. A 24 became a 56. A 31 became a 68. The numbers weren't perfect, but they were progress. And with progress came something new: self-respect. One evening, as Lucas walked Evelyn to the bus stop, he finally asked the question that had haunted him since their first meeting. "You said life threw you off balance. What happened?" Evelyn's steps slowed. For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Then she spoke, her voice quiet. "I once had a classroom of my own, students who called me Professor Wallace. I loved it. But when my husband died, the bills swallowed me whole. The university didn't wait. They replaced me before the funeral flowers had wilted. So I cleaned floors to keep breathing." Lucas's throat tightened. "I'm sorry." Evelyn shook her head. "Don't be. Life didn't break me. It refined me. And now maybe it's refining you too." Lucas looked at her with something he had never felt for anyone outside his family. Respect. But respect would soon be tested. The school announced midterms. For Lucas, it wasn't just a test. It was a verdict. Pass, and he'd stay. Fail, and his father would ship him off to Europe, away from Evelyn, away from the fragile foundation he was building. The night before the exam, Lucas sat in his room, papers spread across his desk, Evelyn's lessons echoing in his mind. Silence, discipline, humility. For the first time, he didn't study out of fear of his father. He studied for himself. As dawn broke, Lucas closed his notebook, his hands trembling. Tomorrow wasn't just another day. It was the day everything would change.
The exam room was suffocatingly quiet. Pens scratched against paper, chairs creaked, and Lucas's heartbeat thundered louder than both. He stared at the math test in front of him, a battlefield of equations. Panic clawed at his throat. Old habits whispered, "You're going to fail. You're the same Lucas Reed who always fails." Then Evelyn's voice echoed in his mind. Silence. Discipline! Humility! He closed his eyes for 3 breaths. Silence. He pushed away the panic. Discipline. He picked up his pen and started with the problems. He knew. Humility. He didn't pretend to know everything. He skipped what stumped him and circled back patiently. For 2 hours, he fought not against the paper, but against himself. When the proctor called time, Lucas set down his pen, drenched in sweat, but not broken. For the first time in his life, he walked out of an exam room without the crushing certainty of failure. The results came a week later. Lucas unfolded the paper in trembling hands. 74. Not perfect! Not top of the class, but more than double his usual scores. For a moment, he just stared, unable to breathe. Then laughter burst from him, not mocking laughter. Not bitter laughter, but the raw, stunned kind that comes when the impossible finally bends. He had done it. But Charles Reed wasn't so easily convinced. At dinner that night, Lucas laid the paper on the table beside his father's plate. 74. Charles adjusted his glasses, glancing at the grade as though it were a stock report. He looked up slowly, his expression unreadable. "So, you improved." Lucas swallowed. "I worked for it!" His father leaned back, folding his arms. "And what changed? Tutors! Some girl helping you cheat." Lucas's jaw tightened. "No. Just me." Charles's eyes bored into him, sharp as glass. "Don't lie to me, Lucas." For a heartbeat, Lucas almost confessed about Evelyn. But then he thought of her broom closet, of the lessons she risked her job to give. If his father knew, he might crush her without hesitation. So Lucas held his ground. "It was me." Charles studied him for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "We'll see if it lasts." And it did. Weeks turned into months. Lucas's grades kept climbing slowly, imperfectly, but undeniably. The lazy boy who once mocked teachers now asked questions, stayed late, and even helped classmates who struggled. The school buzzed with whispers. Some called it a miracle. Others suspected manipulation. But only Evelyn knew the truth that Lucas Reed had finally stepped into his own shadow and chosen to stand taller. But shadows don't stay hidden forever. One afternoon, Charles Reed arrived at school unannounced. Walking the halls with his commanding presence, he stopped when he saw his son sweeping the corridor beside Evelyn. Lucas froze, mop in hand. Evelyn froze too. Charles's eyes narrowed, his voice low and dangerous. "What is this?" Silence suffocated the hallway. Students peeked from doorways, whispering. Lucas's throat burned. This was the moment. He could lie, bury everything, or stand on the fragile ground Evelyn had built beneath him. He met his father's eyes. "She's been teaching me, not just cleaning but discipline. Philosophy. How to think. How to be more than your name." Gasps rippled around them. Evelyn's face paled, certain her job was lost. Charles's voice was like ice. "A janitor has been teaching my son?" Lucas's hands shook, but he didn't back down. "Yes. And she's the only reason I'm not failing anymore." The silence stretched, suffocating. Charles's expression was unreadable, his jaw tight. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away. That night, Lucas barely slept. Would his father fire Evelyn? Would she vanish from the school tomorrow? But when he entered the hallway the next morning, Evelyn was still there, mop in hand, calm as ever. She gave him a faint smile. "Your father spoke to me." Lucas's stomach dropped. And he asked what I've been teaching you. I told him the truth. Lucas braced for the worst. Evelyn's smile deepened, weary but proud. "He didn't fire me," he said. She paused, her voice trembling. He said, "If you've really changed, maybe I've done what money couldn't." Lucas's chest tightened, relief crashing through him. For the first time in years, his father had seen him not as a failure, not as a burden, but as someone worth fighting for. Months later, Lucas stood at the front of the auditorium, diploma in hand. The applause thundered around him. But his eyes searched only for two faces in the crowd, his father's, proud but restrained, and Evelyn's, quiet but radiant. He thought back to the broom closet, the bucket, the silence. That was where his real education had begun. Years passed. Lucas Reed would go on to study philosophy and economics, building not just a career but a voice, one that spoke for the unheard, one that sought balance between privilege and humility. And though the world came to know him as a leader, an innovator, a reformer, he never forgot the woman who had first shown him how to think. Evelyn Wallace, the janitor who had been a professor, the professor who had been his true teacher. On the day she retired, Lucas visited her small apartment with flowers and a bound notebook. Inside, every page was filled with lessons he had learned, many from her. Some from life. On the first page, he had written, "To Evelyn Wallace, who taught me that the greatest classrooms sometimes hide in broom closets, and that the worth of a teacher isn't in their title, but in their truth." Tears shimmered in her eyes as she closed the book. You've become more than I ever dreamed, Lucas. Lucas smiled softly. No, I just became who you believed I could be. Epilogue! The legacy of balance. Lucas's journey didn't end with grades or success. It lived in the way he carried himself, no longer weighed down by arrogance, but balanced by humility. His father never admitted it outright, but pride flickered in his eyes more often. And Evelyn, though she eventually put down the mop, never stopped teaching not through books or lectures, but through the living proof of Lucas Reed's transformation. Because sometimes, the most powerful education doesn't happen in classrooms, but in the quiet corners where truth whispers and a janitor reminds a broken boy that he can rise.